Hi, welcome to On Point. My name is Charlie McGrath. I'm the founder of WideAwakeNews.com. You're listening to On Point, available exclusively on the Boiling Frogs post. This is kind of an impromptu extra edition this week of On Point, and there's a real good reason for it. My guest coming up here, Ross Caputi, in just a minute, put out a documentary that absolutely blew me away. For those of you who followed me at Wide Awake News or on my YouTube channel, my radio program, you know my history. I'm a Gulf War vet. Went to that region of the world 24 years ago, and that's incredible. That's incredible, and we'll touch on this as we go through the program tonight. 24 years of conflict in that region of the world. I actually saw an article that was about Ross and contacted him before I watched his documentary. The name of the documentary, Fear Not, the Path of the Truth. And I was going to interview him about his experience as a Marine, and the current situation with ISIS in the Middle East. But when I watched this documentary, I do this every day. I cover political events every day. I cover geopolitical events. I cover, the propaganda of the military and security industrial complex. So it doesn't. It takes a lot to get me rattled, and this documentary absolutely did it. I want to start off by saying that right here on Point tonight, you're going to have. I'm 45 years old. I served in the first Gulf War. Ross is considerably younger. He had the opportunity. He was a baby when I served. No offense, Ross. You were probably just a little kid during the first Gulf War. But he had the opportunity, and I say that with air quotes, to serve in that region of the world. As I sit here and record this episode of On Point, I have a 14-year-old son who's sitting 2 rooms away from the studio, who is going to be asked to do the exact same thing. Now, I consider Ross to be a hero. I consider him to be a hero not because of his military service, although I respect that. I consider him to be a hero for what he did after his military service. I believe with my whole entire heart that it is incumbent upon us, regardless if we're military service or whatever we consider our level of patriotism, to see injustice and point it out when we do see that injustice. And one of the things that moved me about this documentary is that level of character Ross displayed, serving in Iraq, being in the fight that he was in, knowing friends, and I can commiserate with him on this, knowing people who died for this cause, yet still having the courage to stand up and call it what it is, a complete and total lie. That's the premise of tonight's program. We're gonna talk about his experience in Fallujah, the lie that was the Second Battle of Fallujah, and a little bit about current events. Now, Ross Caputi, thank you very much, and I meant every word I said. I truly consider your actions post military service completely heroic. I respect your service to this country. But what you're doing afterward takes real courage in the face of everything that is presented to us as patriotic. Thank you very much, and welcome to On Point.
Oh yeah, man, thank you. That's too much.
It isn't too much. Like I said, I do this every single day of the week, and it's very few things that move me, and your documentary did. As I mentioned, and let's get into a little bit. I want to give the audience a little bit of your background. You were in the Marine Corps, but give us a little bit about Ross Caputi, where you're from, how you ended up in the military.
I'm from central Massachusetts. No place notable. Kind of just like working class town. My dad ran a bar. Most of my family was landscapers. I thought I was going to be a landscaper when I got out of the Marine Corps. So, basically, I didn't grow up very political. My family never talked about politics. I didn't have like any deep ideas about, a citizen's duty in a democracy, and what it meant to be an American and to serve in the military and all these things. I was kind of just a very insecure 18-year-old kid, and I kind of bought into the Marine Corps' whole line of becoming a man, and all these things that the Marine Corps could do for you in terms of like getting girls and having your community respect you and all this stuff.
Sure.
It's pretty, in retrospect, a selfish decision, more than anything else.
Not really, and I'll interrupt you just for a second because and that's one of the things that drew me to you and your project is our similar backgrounds, and it isn't just coincidence. We have a built-in draft in this country.
Yeah,
you're from anywhere, Massachusetts. I'm from anywhere, Montana. Right, mining town, no jobs, nothing to do once you graduated high school, type of thing. So naturally, you're looking for opportunities, and I know by messaging with you earlier, you're in school right now. So I'm sure one of the considerations you had was getting a college education. I'm the exact same way. I couldn't afford it. My dad couldn't afford it. So we have this built-in draft. So
there's
go
that
ahead.
going on, but I also feel like there's another element of it where we tend to look at war as like an experience, right? And I very much wanted that war experience. I wanted to come back home, say I was a combat vet, go to bars and get free beers and stuff like that, and kind of get all that privilege that you get in this country for being a combat vet. And I didn't even think about who I had to go to war against. I just wanted to go to war. I wanted that experience, So that's the selfish end of it. But it's a cultural thing,
No doubt about it, and I understand it. I've been there. I've done it. I felt the exact same thing. Yeah. And it's. I guess I'm not going to spend this program debating the patriotism behind it, but the simple fact is we are geared to believe that we can do no wrong in this country, that our military can do no wrong, and we build up these young men, and we completely turn into non-persons these people that we encourage them to go perpetrate these acts against. So without a doubt. Let's so you're going to the Marine Corps. You're involved in the so-called de facto draft just because of a situation where you're at, like so many people in this country are. I want to just take it right to Fallujah because this is a pivotal moment in 2004 for the U.S. occupation of Iraq. Obviously, regardless of people's amount of study they've done on this battle, everybody's heard of it because it was, when you were there, it was all over the news. We found him. We found where the terrorist hotbed was. We found where al-Awlaki was. We found, if we can route him out, this is the terror headquarters of Iraq, and we need to go in and prosecute it. And don't worry about it because there's no civilians there. They all left out, and it's nothing but a bunch of terror-loving terrorists there. Give me how your command brought to the Marines this level of fervor to go in and commit the acts that were committed.
Yeah, they used like a hostage crisis type analysis or analogy where they said that, the city of Fallujah had been taken over by this band of terrorists, led by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq. And they were oppressing the civilian population of Fallujah, ruling the city by force and by terror. And we were going to come in and liberate them, right? So there was this idea of the enemy that, they were either ideologically or religiously driven to hate us for some irrational reason, and they were oppressing the civilians of Fallujah who didn't support them. And the only option was an all-out military siege, like the second siege of Fallujah, right?
Yeah.
But all of this just turned out to be like completely inaccurate, just a blatant lie. The Marine Corps was conducting a psychological operation to exaggerate the role of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi in Iraq. And this was really important because he was kind of the main, casus belli for the second siege of Fallujah. He was sort of the main premise or the main like existential threat that we said we had to go in and remove.
Right.
We said he was the leader of Al Qaeda in Iraq. The main source of insecurity and criminality in Iraq at the time. And
he was the boogeyman.
He was the boogeyman. And the elections were coming up in January, and the occupation so desperately needed to make it look like that this was a legitimate election, not one being forced down the throat of Iraqis at the end of a gun, right?
Right.
So they needed to just kill any threat that opposed those elections. But the thing is, no Fallujah has ever seen this guy Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. There is zero evidence that this man ever set foot in their city, and it was just a psychological operation by the U.S. military to turn him into this boogeyman mythological figure. And not only was he the main existential threat, he was also like an impossible condition on peace, because the occupation and the interim Iraqi government, they told the leadership in Fallujah that you either need to turn over Abu Musab al-Zarqawi to us, or we're going to come in and lay siege to your city, which is obviously ridiculous because the man was never in Fallujah. So it was just this like monumental lie that led into this the biggest operation of the entire occupation that killed so many people and displaced hundreds of thousands and poisoned an entire city for eternity.
Sure, and it's almost like. It's almost like a microcosm of the war on terror, right? You have to build up the boogeyman. You have to install this fear. In the case of the second siege of Fallujah, they were installing this fear in the people of this country. We were already there under false pretenses. We needed to have this major victory and probably send a signal. What the combined might of the United States and the British was going to be. So you set up this boogeyman of al-Zarqawi, and you convince that regardless of what the outcome is, it is going to be worth the carnage and the sacrifice. And this is a relatively small scale, one city, but we see it throughout the planet now. Everything is based on this model of generating the fear and then offering the solution. But the solution inevitably leads to innocents being, wiped out, and the loss of, in the case of the United States, in our current situation, the loss of freedom and the loss of sovereignty. So, it's a textbook case or a textbook model of how this planet is run at this point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To this very day, with ISIS being the boogeyman in Iraq today, they're still using this model.
Wholeheartedly, and it's it isn't just Iraq, it's North Africa, and it isn't going to be just North Africa. We see it's spreading to Eastern Europe now, and I'm more than confident that that's going to be the next terror hotspot where we have to go in and free the people of Ukraine from these pro-Russian separatist terrorists or something along those lines. But I want everybody to understand, because the propaganda on Fallujah was nonstop. It was absolutely intense, and it was a battle cry. They tried to make it almost into like an Alamo type situation. But give me an idea from somebody who's a Marine who's been on the ground. What is Fallujah? Is it a town of 1,000 people? Is it a couple thousand? What was Fallujah, and what did it turn into?
Fallujah, it's roughly the size of Boston. It's a city of 300,000 people. It's one of the biggest cities in western Iraq and on Anbar province. And, historically, it has always been a city that was very militant and, very nationalistic, in that they just will not accept foreign occupations. They were one of the main forces that kicked the British out of Iraq when the British was occupying them back in the 1920s. And they've always kind of had this reputation as a city that, just could not be dominated by foreign powers. So, yeah, but the second siege came in and just destroyed a full 2/3 of the city. The estimates were 1/3 was completely leveled to the ground, just like rubble just raised to the ground. The next third every building had major structural damage, like walls falling down, enormous holes in every house. and the last third only had minor structural damage. The electrical grid was completely destroyed. The plumbing throughout the city was completely destroyed. 200,000 refugees, somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 civilians killed. And the ecological damage is arguably the worst part of this, because now in Fallujah there's a really serious public health crisis, possibly one of the most serious public health crises in the world right now, where you got 14% of all babies born in Fallujah being born with birth defects. And cancer rates in children are 12 times the norm. It's just, it's awful.
Well, I was going to say that 14% for folks that don't understand how big of a number that is. You point out in your documentary that in a nation like in Japan, the birth defect rate is about 1 or 2%. Yeah. So and then independent organizations have went in and tested, and not only found depleted uranium, which is used in munitions, but they found enriched uranium. I mean, these are carcinogens that are and causing birth defects on massive scale to a city that is that's what blows me away. The size of the city, 300,000 people. This is a major American city. If you could only imagine every single building, every single home sustaining some kind of damage. Now, give me. I don't know how to ask this loaded question, so I'll just say it outright. Yeah. The narrative was that, Ross, as a Marine, you're out there gunning and doing reconnaissance by fire, but don't worry about it, Ross, because the only people left in this town are terrorists. Was that the case?
That was exactly the case. That's what my command told us. Going into the city, all civilians had left. You don't have to worry about non-combatants. And on it's just so strange, because our mentality is really kind of like it's inexplainable, or inexcusable, inexplainable. It was just madness once we got into the city. On the very first day, we saw civilians. They were trying to cross the street with white flags in the middle of a big gunfight, and so obviously civilians were in the city, and we knew it. But that didn't give us reason to change our tactics or reason to be more cautious with the way we were proceeding. On the second or third day, we saw a civilian again. An old man standing on the side of the road with prayer beads in his hand was shot and killed. But, we continued to operate as if there were no civilians in the city, and as if we didn't have to take any precautions to safeguard civilian life. We were bulldozing houses to the ground, like any house we suspected of having, possibly having insurgents inside. We just bulldoze it to the ground rather than sending our guys in and possibly, them getting hurt. Maybe a week into 5 days, 6 days into it, I saw the unit to our right flank bulldozing an entire neighborhood, just one house after the other, not even checking to see what's inside. Things just, our safety became like the most important thing. And any idea of safeguarding civilian life went out the window immediately. So we proceeded completely indiscriminately, using tactics like reconnaissance by fire, like you mentioned, and just proceeding as if there were no civilians, even though we kept finding civilians in the city. It was just madness.
And if I remember correctly from your report, the people would try to leave, and in some cases, women and children, would be allowed to leave. But if they were fighting age males, they weren't getting out of Fallujah.
Yeah. And it's important to note that, that's a major war crime. By definition, that's indiscriminate, It didn't matter if there was any evidence that they were resistance fighters or not. And it was so strange, too, because on one hand, we were trying to create this sharp distinction between the bad guys in the city and the civilians, but at the same time, we were collapsing the two. So it was just this strange mentality that in the end justified whatever we did.
What was the reaction? I mean, the fact is you're in the heat of battle. So in 2004, you're not the same Ross Caputi as you are now, right? You're not the same person that you were after the battle. Your priorities obviously were to survive. But was there was there recognition by by yourself at the time, or any of the other troops, the combat troops? I'm not talking. I mean, even the leadership at the lieutenant level or captain or company level. I'm sure we're all swept up in this, but was there any feeling at that time that this was horribly wrong, and it was going to be an absolute massacre for non-combatants?
No, that's the craziest thing to me. Just how much we were able to kind of like delude ourselves, and
Yeah.
even seeing women and children fleeing into the desert, leaving their homes and like heading off into this like desperate situation. You still manage to convince yourself that you're doing this for them, for their freedom and democracy, and you tell yourself this story and you believe it. I mean, I remember walking into people's houses, seeing family photo albums and, pictures on the wall, pictures of a once, very happy city, and like,
Yeah.
all the memories, attached to these houses, and, and destroying their houses and seeing people loot out of their houses and all this stuff, and still being able to feel like, we were doing this for them. There's no other word for it. It's just madness. It was totally irrational. It can't be explained.
Well, and the thing, when you're there in 2004, a city of 300,000 people coping, getting by, and they've been living at that point in time, all of Iraq had been living under, years of sanctions and years of U.S. Bombing them on occasion, or at least preventing the basic necessities of life for the people of Iraq. And let's be really clear: Hussein never suffered. He never suffered from any UN sanction. It was the people in these cities that suffered. So you're already going into a town that was probably getting by at best, right?
Yeah, I mean, from the friends that I have now in Fallujah, people I work with, through the activism I do, they tell me about that period. And, they had to eat bread that was so moldy, it was entirely blue and green. And,
Yeah.
it was so tough to find like basic, like, nutrition, meat, vegetables, produce. They were just living off of scraps. It was a really desperate time for them.
It's amazing to me, and watching your documentary, and just when you sit in retrospect and contemplate the situation of the people, these individuals in Fallujah, it's amazing to me that there wasn't more fight, there wasn't more attacks, that there isn't more animosity because they've been living in such conditions for so long, and then to have the British and Americans roll in and basically turn their city of 300,000 into a giant FEMA camp, and then just start knocking stuff down. It's amazing to me that this is. I mean, look, this is how we have generated terrorism on this planet. I mean, I have to ask myself, would I do the exact same thing? And I'll ask you that. Can you imagine in your hometown, if this kind of thing occurred, to what extent you would go to eliminate anybody who was associated with that occupation?
Well, the thing that's so inspiring about the people of Fallujah is that they always try nonviolent means first, and they always treat violent resistance as a last resort. And honestly, if I were in their situation, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if just the rage and the injustice would just, turn me into like a hateful person that wanted to kill. I don't know. But, their very first way of trying to resist the imposition of martial law in their city was to have a peaceful protest outside of a school in 2003, just, a couple weeks after the shock and awe bombing.
Right.
And they were massacred. A U.S. Army battalion fired into the crowd and killed 16 protesters. Same thing the next day. They had a repeat protest. It was nonviolent. The crowd was not armed. And they got fired on again. 2 people were killed. And at that point, then the armed resistance started. So it wasn't armed resistance from the beginning. And again, this is played out again, where for the entire year of 2013, there was a nonviolent protest movement throughout Iraq, but kind of centered in Anbar province, notably in Fallujah and Ramadi. They were very dedicated to this tactic of nonviolence, even though the government of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki was attacking them repeatedly with U.S. weapons. They stayed true to this tactic of nonviolence for an entire year. But only after, having their leaders assassinated and having, like 100 people over the course of the year killed, did they turn to armed resistance. And that began in January, 2014. And that's when we started to hear all these headlines about ISIS taking over Fallujah, which was a lie.
Yeah. Well, and who knows where it goes from there. I mean, I have a very strong suspicion, that 300 non-combat troops, this is just a warm-up. We're going to continue, like I said at the beginning. I was there in 91. You were there in the mid-2000s. And, the next generation is going to be asked to go and do the same thing. That's why I believe it's paramount that people like you stand up and tell the truth. Let's get into your. I'm looking at the clock here. We're pushing 30 minutes already, but I definitely want to talk a little bit about your activism now. Again, it takes a lot of courage to. First of all, you probably take, in some respects, especially blue collar town. Like I said, like where I'm from, I take a lot of heat. I get called anti-American. I get called, that I'm a terrorist supporter because of my positions on war or positions on things like this Battle of Fallujah. Let me ask you before we get into your sites, have you had any pushback like that?
Mostly from other veterans.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they're the ones who are most hostile to what I have to say. Yeah. It's interesting, but I get it at the same time because, it's so hard losing friends in a situation like that you got to believe that they died for something good, right? Yeah. And you want so badly to believe that, and it's just a tough pill to swallow to know that that's not the truth. So I get it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, no, I know exactly what you mean, and it's also really hard to admit you were wrong, and regardless if it's military service that I'm going to speak for myself. I know now was a lie, and the things that happened were a lie. I mean, you talk about the condition of Fallujah. I remember the condition of Iraq when we rolled across the berms from Saudi Arabia into Iraq. I was told these are barbarians. That I'm going into something that's reminiscent of the 1800s, and it was a complete lie. I mean, Iraq was a very modern nation. Rivaled anything in Western Europe, and it was just completely 60+ days of air war, completely decimated. So it's hard to admit. I mean, sometimes that's the hardest thing, is to say that I was duped, and regardless if it's military service or if you're just sitting back as a quote good American. And you're buying the narrative of patriotism, and we need to go out and fight these wars to spread freedom and to protect our freedom. And it's really a hard thing to get over that hurdle of I was fooled, because I think a lot of people are just either embarrassed or they don't think that that their government or that powers that be behind government would actually do such a thing. But the truth is that once you get past that hurdle, it comes rushing in. Reality comes rushing in. At least it did for me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. You got to give up that the sort of that nostalgic belief that our government has our best interests in mind, and that everything we do is great and things like that. And I think you need to just have a bit more of a detached stance on it. Don't invest so much emotion in government, or in our government, or No, and find the truth for yourself. That's exactly what you've done with Fear Not the Path of the Truth. You had questions when it was all done, and so you did the patriotic thing. I think the truly patriotic thing, which is you found out the truth for yourself and you did something about it. Tell me about your activism now. Tell me about your websites. Let's do all we can to get some people over there and do some promotion on that. Yeah, so now I'm on the board of directors of ISLA, which is a reparations project, and we kind of have our own idea of what reparations should look like. We're not so much interested in reparations from governments, like the legal form of reparations. It's more about voluntary reparations from individuals,
Oh,
from people of conscience who feel that our society has harmed other societies in some way. And we kind of give them an opportunity to own that responsibility, to speak that truth, and then to kind of take action to begin this process of repairing that harm. So, we got a number of projects going on. One of them is the Justice for Fallujah project, and we're doing a few things with that. We're trying to bring medical equipment to the Fallujah hospital. We're also trying to get other hospitals in Iraq subscriptions to medical journals, because they have nothing right now. They don't have any resources at all, not even journals that they can use to diagnose all these new birth defects that they're finding. So, we're asking people to get involved with these projects, make a sustained commitment, not just to like give money and then, go home and forget about it, but to actually, like contribute, make some sort of material contribution, but also, volunteer, stay involved, understand the issue and, continue to speak truth about it. So we're hoping that this is sort of a more transformative process from traditional activism, and it kind of creates more of like an engaged public here at home.
I love it. I love the idea because, you end up with some ownership and realize that it isn't just about a border and somebody being, some kind of savage. These are actual human beings and you're invested in it. And I think, seeing seeing that investment, or if you made that investment, you're going to, that will change just by the nature of that investment, change your outlook on the world and the narrative that is presented to us. What is so that is www.reparations.org, right?
Yeah, reparations.org. The name is ISLAH, which is Arabic for reparations.
ISLAH, ISLAH, reparations.org. We'll have a link to that to this interview as well. I'll also have it up at wideawakenews.com. And in closing, if you haven't seen, if you haven't watched this documentary, Fear Not: The Path of the Truth, it's an hour and a half long, and it's you won't stop. Just sit and watch it and understand that everything that's going on now isn't coincidence. It isn't an accident. It's a narrative that we're hearing now, the patriotism that's trying to be generated now. It has all been done before. And when we fall victim to this, Americans die, people around this world die, and we end up finding out that the cause is nothing more than the same thing being regenerated over and over again. Never what it seems. Never to spread freedom, never to spread democracy, always to enrich and benefit a very select few. So it's time to to wake up and realize that the people of Iraq are human beings. The people of Syria are human beings. The never-ending war footing that we are on is building terrorists on this planet, people that want to kill us. And if you understand what we've been involved in and what has been done in our name, you can understand why this hostility is being created. Ross Caputi, I cannot thank you enough for your documentary and for coming on here once again. Reparations.org is the website. I wish you the best of luck, and I definitely want to get you your material on my website and get you on some of the other programs and platforms that I do. Thank you very much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, guys, that's it for On Point tonight. I appreciate everybody hanging out. Again, more information on Ross and his activism, you can find that at wideawakenews.com, or later you can find it in the description area down below on this video. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.